Chapter 7. Anna got involved with everything and anything. Her involvement was on such a deep level that very little ever frightened her. She was ready to meet everything on its own terms. At whatever level the thing existed, Anna would be there to meet it. Occasionally, she'd run into a situation for which she had no adequate word. She'd invent one, either a brand new one, or she'd teach an old one to do a new trick. Like the night she told me that the light, it frays. Of course, I should have known that light frayed, but I didn't. So I had to go out into the dark street, armed with a torch and a tape measure. With the aid of a nearby dustbin and the railway wall, it was demonstrated to me that light really did fray. The torch glass measured 4 inches across. The torch was placed on the top of the dustbin and the beam directed onto the railway wall. We measured the patch of light. It was just over 3 feet across. The dustbin and the torch were then moved back a few paces, and we measured the patch of light again. It was over 4 foot 6 inches across. The light did indeed fray. Why, Finn? Why does it do that? So we'd go indoors again, and out would come a paper and pencil, and I'd explain. Can't you make it so it don't fray? So we talked about reflectors and lenses. It got taken in, digested, stored in its proper place, and poised against some unknown eventuality. The mirror book had provided Anna with another technique for writing out interesting facts. The whole business of turning the thing inside out, or left to right, or upside down. That some of her facts weren't facts but fantasies didn't matter a jot, since by this time Anna knew exactly and precisely what a fact was. A fact was the hard outer cover of meaning, and meaning was the soft living stuff inside a fact. Fact and meaning were the driving cogs of living. If the gear of fact drove the gear of meaning, then they would revolve in opposite directions, but you put the gear of fantasy between the two, and then they both revolved in the same direction. Fantasy was and is important. It leads to heaven knows where, but follow it and see. Sometimes it pays off. The mirror book turned things from left to right, so why not turn everything round the other way for a start? Newton had a law. So did Anna. Anna's law was, first turn it inside out, then turn it upside down, then back to front, and then side to side, and then have a jolly good look at it. And, Finn, do you know that room spelt backwards is more? Well, a room is a particular space surrounded by walls, and a moor is a particular space not surrounded by walls. So it makes some kind of sense, doesn't it? And while we're on the subject of rooms, Finn, if you spell roof backwards, it spells four. Can I add an L and make it spell floor? Well, I don't see why not. Finn, is a rood a window because its door spelt backwards? Finn, do you know that lived backwards is devil? Do you know that Anna spelt backwards is Anna? All right. So it's all coincidence. It's not relevant. Perhaps not, but it's fun, and sometimes the most surprising things happen. Words became for Anna living things. She took them apart and put them back together again. She learnt what made them tick. She made no great etymological discoveries, but she learned words and how to use them. Anna also painted. Not very beautiful pictures, I admit, but then she painted under a severe handicap. She'd paint a picture wearing coloured glasses, and then laugh at the result. And then, "Finn, will you make my red glasses blue for me?" And she'd paint another picture. None of Anna's pictures were ever hung on the wall. They were never meant to. They were explorations into looking. It was very rash to deny the possibility that a red rose might be able to see. It might, just might, be able to see through its red petals or its green leaves. And you had to find out what the world might look like, hadn't you? Being a sum-doer myself, I was very interested in Anna's approach to mathematics. It was love at first sight. Numbers were beautiful things. Numbers were funny things, and they were without doubt God's stuff. As such, you treated them with reverence. God's stuff behaved itself. True, God's stuff was sometimes very difficult to grab hold of. Mr. God had, it seemed, told the numbers just what they were and just how to behave. Numbers knew exactly where and how they belonged in the scheme of things. Sometimes it suited Mr. God to hide his number in sums or in mirror books, and mirror books, as you know, could get pretty darn complicated at times. The love affair with numbers soured a little bit, and for a long time I never knew why. It was Charles who put me onto the track of an explanation. Charles taught at the same school as Miss Hines. Miss Hines taught sums. Anna's attendance at school was reluctant and not too frequent, as I was to discover later. At one of these sums lessons, Miss Hines had focused her attention on Anna. "If," said Miss Hines to Anna, "you had 12 flowers in a row and you had 12 rows, how many flowers would you have?" Poor Miss Hines. If she had only asked Anna what 12 times 12 was, she would have got her answer. But no, she had to start messing around with flowers and rows and things. Miss Haynes got an answer. Not the one she expected, though, but an answer nonetheless. Anna had sniffed. This particular kind of sniff indicated the most utter disapproval. "If," replied Anna, "you grew flowers like that, you shouldn't have no bloody flowers." Miss Haynes was made of stern stuff, and the impact of this answer left her unmoved, so she tried again. "You have 7 sweeties in one hand and 9 sweeties in your other hand. How many sweeties do you have altogether?" "None," said Anna. "I ain't got none in this hand and I ain't got none in this hand, so I ain't got none. And it's wrong to say I have if I ain't." Brave Miss Haynes tried again. "I mean, pretend, dear, pretend that you have." Being so instructed, Anna pretended, and came out with the triumphant answer, 14. "Oh, no, dear," said brave Miss Haynes, "you've got 16. You see, 7 and 9 make 16. "I know that," said Anna, "but you said pretend. So I pretended to eat one and I pretended to give one away, so now I've got 14. I've always thought that Anna's next remark was made to ease the look of pain and anguish on poor Miss Haynes' face. I didn't like it. It wasn't nice, she said, as a sort of self-inflicted punishment. This sort of attitude to the Mr. God stuff of numbers was almost unforgivable, and it rocked Anna more than somewhat. The final blow came in the street one summer's evening. Dink was sitting on the doorstep doing his homework. Dink was about 14 and going to the Central School. Dink could score goals from impossible angles and could knock a sixer over the railway wall with one wallop. But Dink and maths were strangers. Well, pretty well strangers. "Silly bugger," said Dink. "What's up, Dink?" "This geezer's having a bath." "Ain't Friday, is it?" "What's Friday got to do with it?" "Bath night." "That's got nothing to do with it." "What's the geezer doing, Dink?" He's got both taps turned on and he ain't got the plug in. 'Struth, some mothers do have 'em, and they live. We ain't got no taps in our bath. We keep it in the yard and fill it up with a bucket out of the copper. What you got to do, Dink? Find out how long the bath takes to fill. He'll never do it. Never. He'll get his death a cold standing around in the nude. He's a twit. Let him bath himself. Have a game of footy, Dink. I bags being goalkeeper. Anna had been listening to this exchange, and it confirmed her worst fears. Sums were an invention of the devil. They turned you away from the real God stuff of numbers and tied you up in a world of idiots. It was just past knocking off time, and we'd got the worst of the muck off our hands. Cliff and George and I were crossing the yard, heading for the gate, and there she was waiting. I broke into a run at seeing her, wondering. She ran to meet me. "What's wrong, Titch? What happened?" I asked. "Oh, Finn!" She threw her arms around me. "It's so lovely, I couldn't wait." "What's lovely? What is?" Anna fished about in her pouch and thrust something into my hands. A sheet of graph paper, numbered in each square. It looked straightforward enough to me. The number in the top left-hand corner was -2. The numbers progressed across the paper. -1, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. The next line began 8, 9, 10, 11, etc. 6 rows of numbers, ending up with the number 57 in the bottom right-hand corner of the page. It was a simple arrangement of consecutive numbers. Anna searched my face, waiting for it to light up. It didn't. It just registered puzzlement. I'll show you, she said excitedly. We knelt there on the pavement, homeward-going workers making a detour around us, with amused little smiles on their faces. Anna traced around a large square made up of 4 smaller squares. The top 2 squares were numbered 22 and 23, and the bottom 2, 32 and 33. Add those 2, she commanded, pointed to the diagonal numbers 22 and 33. 55, I obliged her. Now those 2. She pointed at the other pair of diagonals, numbers 23 and 32. 55, I grinned. The same, she squirmed with delight. Ain't it wonderful, Finn? Next, she traced a large square made up of 16 smaller squares. With 2 quick strokes of her pencil, she divided 16 into 4 squares, each containing 4 of the smaller squares. And that lot, she pointed at the top left group of 4 squares and then at the bottom right group of 4 squares. Now these, she said, indicating the top right group and the bottom left group. The answer was the same. For the best part of 30 minutes, we juggled with groups of squares. It was always the same. The group of numbers in one diagonal was always the same as the group of the diagonals on the other side. It was obvious when you thought about it. One diagonal was the mirror image of the other diagonal, so it followed naturally that all the numbers on the diagonal were, in some mysterious way, the mirror image of all the numbers on the diagonal on the other side. Good old Mr. God! He'd done it again! Later that evening, I was told she had made scores of these arrangements, putting the 0 wherever her fancy led her. Also, she had found some very complicated series, and it always worked. Mr. God numbers, the real God stuff, was, as you might expect, a never-ending miracle. As for that other stuff, the bath-filling lark that old Nick used numbers for, well, phew. Anna's refusal to get involved in this devil stuff in some books was absolute. There was no power on earth, and for that matter in hell either, that could make her. I tried to explain that all this devil stuff was simply a means of demonstrating the laws of what you could and couldn't do with numbers. I needn't have bothered. Anyhow, Mr. Godstuff told you what you could and couldn't do too. Do you mean to tell me that you'd go to the trouble of getting